We can start by just taking a minute to drop in together, bringing the attention to the breath, feeling our connection with the ground. Noticing what we're arriving with, any stories, thoughts, physical sensations, emotions, just taking a moment to notice. And then, as you're ready, we can transition to moving. And it's fine to stay sitting or lying down. Feel free to wiggle out in your bed with blankies, with pillows, or you can take this time to transition to standing. Just noticing how the feet feel today, the legs, the pelvis, the spine, shoulders, the head. And then taking a moment to shake out the hands and feet, just wiggling out any extra energy, letting go of anything that we're holding on to that we don't need right now. And then we might rub our hands together and bring the hands to the low back. So we'll take some time exploring the pelvis today, just noticing the shape of your pelvis, the weight of the pelvis, this central part of the body, the low belly, the hips. And then you might shake out the hands and feet again. Maybe rubbing your hands up and down the spine, feeling the connection between the spine and the pelvis. You might rub your hands together and bring the hands over the eyes. Just taking a moment to pause, releasing any tension around the eyes, behind the eyes, and enjoying a moment of darkness. Just resting the eyes, going inward. And then following your own rhythm, your own invitations from the body, going from head to feet, tending to every part of you. Exploring the ears, the scalp, the skull. Noticing this upward pull, the energy pulling the body up towards the sky, and gravity grounding the body down towards the earth. Relaxing the jaw, tending to the neck and throat, feeling the chest, the ribs, the shoulders. unwinding the wingspan, exploring the length of the arms, the fingers, tending to the whole area around the ribs, the breasts, the shoulders, scapula, the sides of the torso, the belly. And traveling all the way down the legs, the hips, the pelvis. You might shake out the legs, the thighs, the calves, wiggling the ankles. Feeling the feet, each toe. And then taking a moment to warm up the hips, exploring the movement of the pelvis, the connection between the feet and the pelvis. And then slowly transitioning to stillness, following any last movements, wiggles, stretches, maybe a little dance. And then transitioning to sitting or lying down. Allowing the breath to lead the way, following the waves of breath. And once you've arrived in your position to welcome in stillness, exploring the alignment of your bones. So we might rock the pelvis forward and back, noticing how that affects the spine, the shoulders, the head, belly. Maybe closing the eyes. And if you're sitting, making sure that your pelvis is lifted up on a pillow. And then finding that place where the belly can relax. The spine can be long. The shoulders are wide. The chest is open. You can relax the jaw. Relax around the eyes. And then bringing our attention to the breath, allowing the breath to be slow and long. Feeling the breath fill us up. And empty. Noticing the rise and fall of the chest and belly. And seeing if we can breathe all the way down to the pelvic floor. So we might imagine that the whole upper body is like a balloon that expands as we breathe in and then contracts as we breathe out. Expanding the throat, the chest, the ribs, lengthening the spine, softening the belly all the way down to the pelvic floor, and then letting it all go. Noticing thoughts as they come and go, and seeing if we can just allow them to float by like clouds in the sky. So we don't have to follow them. We don't have to push them away. We just notice as they arise. And we come back to the sensations of the breath moving throughout the body, to the sound of the breath, the temperature of the air, the texture of our clothing, feeling our connection with the ground, allowing the body to be heavy and supported. And letting go of any extra effort. Noticing how the breath fills and empties on its own without us having to do anything. Giving ourselves this time just to be here, letting go of doing, of planning, of thinking. Taking this time for ourselves to drop in, to enjoy these bodies. Maybe bringing one hand to the chest, one hand to the belly. Just feeling the movement of breath. Following any tiny adjustments that we might need to make to allow our bodies to be more comfortable. To allow breath to fill us up, to take up space. Maybe practicing with sounding on the exhale. That helps you arrive in your body more. Maybe just a sigh. Maybe there's a loud roar that wants to escape. Maybe practicing with forced lips. Noticing if sounding or forced lips or a sigh helps to relax the pelvic floor. And then following these next 3 breaths, knowing that in a few moments we'll welcome in more movement. Seeing if we can enjoy these last moments of stillness, of quiet, maybe finding a tiny smile, relaxing around the eyes a little more, finding more length in the spine. And then beginning to welcome in any tiny movements, just following the invitations of your own body, following the breath, following gravity, and any energy that's pulling the body upwards towards the sky. Maybe allowing the head to hang, noticing what happens in the pelvis. Maybe following tiny circles with the pelvis or the spine, with the head. Noticing the angles of the body, the bones, the hard places. Noticing the soft, squishy places. Noticing the fluid body. And the air traveling in and out. And then you might explore soft, easy undulations of the spine, allowing the head to fall forward, following the invitation of gravity, and noticing what happens in the pelvis, what happens in the low back, in the low belly, and then rocking the pelvis forward, allowing the spine to unfurl, following the invitation up towards the sky, maybe letting the head fall back just a tiny bit. No need to push, no need to stretch, just exploring small, easy movements to bring awareness to the body. Continuing to explore the rock of the pelvis forward and back, and allowing the spine to straighten, to get long, and then maybe leaning the head back. And then curling in towards yourself again. Maybe imagining a fern in the woods, how they curl in towards themselves. And then they follow the light and they uncurl, opening the front of the body, opening the throat, maybe following this exploration a few more times. And if it interests you, you might add soft, easy circles. So maybe the head and the pelvis come closer together. And then the head goes to one side, following a circle with the spine, a circle with the pelvis, a circle with the head, and noticing as you curl in towards yourself, And then as you open up, exposing the belly, the throat, leaning the head back just a bit, exploring circles in both directions, noticing the connection with the ground, and staying with the breath. And maybe we let the circles get bigger. Maybe moving the legs around. Exploring what happens when the legs move into a different position. How does that change the alignment, the sensations in the pelvis? And taking a few more moments to explore soft, easy circles in the spine. And then taking a moment to pause. Noticing any changes in the body, in the mind. And then as you're ready, I'll invite you to begin to map out the bones of the pelvis. So get into any position that feels comfortable, where it feels like you can access the bones of your pelvis. So maybe you have your feet on the ground and your knees up, and you might be sitting on the ground or on a pillow, or maybe you're lying down. That's fine too. And you might start by just finding the sits bones. So if you're sitting, this is pretty easy usually. So you can get one hand under your butt and find on each side there's a hard bone. Feel free to move your legs around however they're going to be most comfortable. So just mapping out these different bones that we can feel with our hands. So maybe you have one hand on your sit bone, and then you might bring one hand to the back of the pelvis, finding the sacrum, the base of the spine, maybe rocking forward and back just to get a sense of these bones, of the space between the sit bone, the sacrum. Maybe you can even feel the very bottom tailbone, the very bottom part of the spine. And you might explore moving your leg around just to see how does this part of the body move? Right? So we've got the sit bone, the tailbone, the sacrum, and then we also have the thigh bone. So we have this femur that is connecting in on the side, moving the hip bone around, the hip joint. And then you might bring one hand to the front of the pelvis and one hand to the back, just noticing how much space there is between the front of the pelvis and the back of the pelvis. Maybe rocking the pelvis forward and back. Again, getting into any position that's comfortable. So you could be sitting or lying down, could be cross-legged or in a froggy position with your legs. And then maybe bringing both hands to the front of the pelvis, just noticing this joint. So we have two bones that come together in the front that make up the pelvic symphysis. So being really gentle here because there are a bunch of nerves that come in, but just noticing how wide are these bones in the front of the pelvis. Maybe bringing one hand to the top of one hip bone. We have these pokey parts in the front of the hips. This is called the anterior spine of the pelvis, which doesn't really matter, but there's a pokey part in the front and there's a pokey part in the back. And you can probably find these two different spines of the pelvis on each side of your hips. So you might bring one hand to the front, finding this spine that pokes out, again, being gentle because there are a lot of nerves that come in, and then finding the back, this pokey part in the back. And then you might rock your pelvis forward and back, just noticing how much space is between your hands. Tapping into the bony landmarks and also exploring the soft tissues that hold all these bones together. And then you might feel this round top of the bone. They almost feel like the shape of ears to me, that there's this round crest on either side of the top part of our pelvis. So just exploring what is the angle of this bone, how much space is between the front and the back of the pelvis, between the sides. So we're just kind of creating an internal map of this part of the body that a lot of us don't know very well, and it changes, especially after pregnancy and birth. So then you might shift to the other side, exploring the front and the back of this hip crest, finding the spine in the front, the spine in the back. Maybe rocking the pelvis forward and back. And then finding the sit bone on the other side too. And maybe bringing one hand to the sit bone, one hand to the sacrum. Just noticing how much space is between the hands. You might notice asymmetries from one side to the other, and then maybe bringing one hand to the front of the pelvis again, and one hand to the back, to the sacrum, to the tailbone. Noticing if there's any sensation of breath moving this area, expanding the low belly, expanding the pelvic floor, and then taking a pause, closing the eyes, noticing if anything has changed. And then slowly, if you're not there already, exploring our way down towards the floor. Finding the support of the ground, feeling the weight of the pelvis, feeling the spine long. You might have your feet on the ground, maybe have your legs out long. And then continuing the exploration with the pelvis. So you might rock the pelvis forward and back, noticing what happens in the spine, in the ribs, in the shoulders, in the neck, the head and throat. And then you might bring the knees in towards the chest. Again, feeling how does this change the sensations of the pelvis, the shape of the pelvis? Maybe bringing one hand to the low belly, and feeling the movement of breath. Maybe bringing one hand to the front of the pelvis, feeling the bone of the pelvic symphysis in the front, noticing the connection with the low belly, and feeling if there's any movement of breath. And then taking a moment of pause, maybe allowing the feet to land on the floor. Just noticing the next few breaths. Taking some time to integrate anything that's happened for you. And then slowly transitioning, coming back together. Maybe finding a seated position again. And feeling for any changes in the pelvis, in the pelvic floor, in your awareness of the connections between the spine, the head and skull and the pelvis.